And with no further ado, I will really, my honor to introduce Julie, who holds a master's degree in education from Montana State University in Billings. And after several years of classroom teaching on her home reservation, she began developing tribal history materials and curriculum and served as the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes Education Director. She's collaborated with Indigenous scholars, knowledge keepers, artists, and musicians, as well as elders and poets to produce material in a variety of media. These include DVDs, like The Story from a Nation Within, or Stories from a Nation Within, Remembering the Songs and Art and Identity, children's books like Gift of the Bitterroot, and Huckleberries, Buttercups, and Celebrations, and any other number of other publications. She's a recipient of the National Milk and Educator Award, the Montana Governor's Humanities Award, and 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards. So, welcome.
Thank you. I'm a busybody. No. I just want to thank you guys for being here. It's such a beautiful evening. I thought, oh, we could maybe do a walking book talk. I don't know how I could do that, but maybe we'll get time for a walk-in. That's my meditation. I try to walk every day. But I want to thank you for taking time to be present. Those of you who are with me in the flesh, which I appreciate. I've done a lot of Zooms. Aren't we kind of zoomed out after the pandemic? But I know that there are those of us that are online, including my sister and brother-in-law in Seattle, so I'll say hi to those folks too. But, you know, it's so important that we come together for things like this. To talk about history and discourse, I want to thank Martha and Laura, Anthony, who figured out the PowerPoint when it said it was corrupt and wouldn't do anything, for inviting me and helping me, and giving me a space. It's a privilege. It is a privilege to have space to speak publicly. I know that. I count it as a privilege. It's also a great responsibility. And particularly to talk about Native history, and I think at this time in our country, and there are a lot of things happening in different states where legislators, and politicians are wading into the fray of inventing and creating history, or confining, or sanitizing, or selecting history, or defining it in ways that become palatable to ideologies. And as I watch this happening, and I did read the Florida state standards, that's what everybody knows about and is talking about, right, on slavery. And I thought about late British historian Alan Munslow, who said that history is never innocent storytelling. It is always ideological, and it is the primary vehicle through which power is distributed and used. And so it's in that context that I want to start talking about this book, because that is how this book happened. This book happened to confront this reality with an anthology that gives space and voice to people in our country who are marginalized, ignored, or silenced, and to the history that is the oldest history of our country. Because this is an old tribal world, this country is. It's a very old tribal world. And so I invited a group of Native scholars to imagine this book with me. I didn't do it alone. I did get a grant from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. I didn't ask them for a grant. They called me and offered me money, and I said, I'll take it. So, because they wanted to support the production of tribally authored materials. Now, if you can imagine that the time that we're living in, the 2000s, right? You know, that we're in this century and that there's still so little information out there about Native people. And if you stop someone on the street and you said, hey, Laura, what can you tell me about treaty law? You know, and a lot of people would be like, what? How many times are American Indian people inferred or mentioned in the Constitution, the United States Constitution? So this book really came about, and some wonderful people agreed to work with me on it, and I gathered them, and I said, we did this not in a way that would happen in mainstream academia, but how we would do it in Indian country, right? I brought everybody to my homeland. I rented houses all over the place. I rented a really big house. We ate sacred food together. We had roast buffalo. We had huckleberries. We floated the river, and we talked story. And we talked about how important stories are and how we make meaning with story, right? We come into the world and we are wired for story. Think about little kids, how much they want a story and how much we want a story. Even my high school students, one day of the week I read stories in the Native American Studies class, and they're like, we're not your second graders, because I'm an elementary teacher. And I said, just bear with me. And that came to be one of their most beloved things. So story, we're wired for story. It's so important. And so we talked story, and we ended up with 24 essays. And one of the things that we wanted to intentionally do, and it was hard for some of the scholars, was to write like you're writing this for your community. Please don't use epistemology or ontology, or hegemony, I mean, those are really great words, I'm a word person. I love a word that says a lot, one word. But we want to write in an accessible way so that a kid in our community, in my community, could pick this book up and engage with it and not sit with a dictionary. What is postmodern? What is post-Marx? I mean, and scholars are trained, and in the academy, there's this hierarchy and this power structure. And one of the things the Native scholars said, they said, wow, this is like the first time that we felt like free, like we're liberated, and we can write in a different way. But some of them still did not really bend to our will. But the other thing that was intentional, writing accessible, and making sure that we included stories of agency. Because a lot of times when you hear Native history, and it's not that it's bad, like I've read so many essays of people that the first thing of Native history they read was "Bury my heart at Wounded Knee," right? And they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that, and it's powerful and traumatizing. But I said the other part of Native history that people don't often get is the agency. The agency of Native people, that it wasn't just that there were all these bad things happening to us, but that we were active forces in our lives, and that we negotiated and we managed and we navigated. And it's miraculous because we're still here. We still have our language, we still have our songs, we still have collective memory of our relatives, we still have our stories. And so we wanted to be sure that we didn't fall into that, we're a victim, because we're not. We're awesome. We are awesome people and amazing, and we have a lot to share. Now, the other thing I wanted to be intentional about was including Alaska Native people and Kanaka Maoli. And I say that instead of Native Hawaiian because I've been schooled. And there's actually 3 versions of it, but I can't remember, but Kanaka Maoli, okay? Because when you get an anthology like History of Indians in the United States, the Alaska Natives aren't there, and the Kanaka Maoli people aren't there. And so I had an amazing group of scholars from the university at Manoa that came and talked story with us, did hula, played the guitar. John Osorio, who I found out was a famous musician in Hawaii, and he was there playing the guitar. But it was a powerful moment. And I said, I think we created ceremony. That's how I felt. We'd get together for a week. We did that for 3 summers. And I felt like at the end that it was ceremony. And when I first started the book, the first person I thought of was Oscar in Alaska, a fabulous Yupik scholar and an even more remarkable human being. And so I tried to get a hold of him right away. And a shared colleague of ours said, oh, Julie, Oscar's really sick. And so through my friend Ray, he sent an essay that he had published in, the Journal of Indian Ed, I don't know how many years ago. Who reads those? No, I'm going to get in trouble over that. No, because they gave me permission. I jokes. No. Anyway, and so, and what do we know? What do I know? Not very much, about Hawaii. What do I know about Alaska? Not very much, about all of these amazing people, and so in the process of doing this, I learned a lot, and I want to share just read really briefly from some of these, so you get a flavor of it. And so Jeannie Brainig wrote about the Alaska Native Claims and Settlement Act. Anybody know about that? You do. Because what has happened in Alaska is a little bit different than what has happened down here, right? And so sometimes us lower 48ers like Mike Jetty, or the Plains Indian group, we're the Plains Indian, we're the Plateaus. No, you know about your group, and it's kind of human nature. And so it was so amazing to me to engage with scholars and to learn, because it's a historic piece of legislation. And its primary purpose was to determine Aboriginal title and resolve disputes among the state of Alaska, environmental activists, the oil industry, and Alaska Natives. And that, and then here's what we end up. Oh, well, I don't know, sorry, I'm gonna have to go. Sorry, there's 2 slides together. I don't know how that happened, maybe in the translation. But what I was trying to show you was the map of the corporations. So very different than treaty lands, than what we went with. And what I'm saying in a kind of clumsy way is that for all of my adult life, I didn't know very much of these stories. When we talk about Hawaii, and I went to Hawaii for an education gathering with Native people and Native Hawaiians, and I got there and I soon realized in about 5 minutes that I was very illiterate, and it was embarrassing. And I didn't know anything about their history. Hawaii being annexed. Does anybody know about the annexation of Hawaii and Queen Leleokalani? This is the Queen, and I want to read just a few of her words to you. I, Leleokalani of Hawaii, by the will of God, named heir apparent on the 10th day of April, AD 1877, and by the grace of God, Queen of the Hawaiian Islands on the 17th day of January, AD 1893, do hereby protest against the ratification of a certain treaty which, so I am informed, has been signed at Washington, purporting to cede those islands to the territory and dominion of the United States. I declare such a treaty to be an act of wrong toward the native and part native people of Hawaii, an invasion of the rights of the ruling chiefs, in violation of international rights, both toward my people and toward friendly nations with whom they have made treaties. The perpetuation of the fraud whereby the constitutional government was overthrown, and finally an act of gross injustice to me. So when I learned that, I realized I've got a long way to go. And there's so much to learn, because there's every indigenous nation has their own history, and it's a little bit different. Some reservations were homesteaded, opened up to homesteading, some were not. So you can't, it's not a generic history. But, I thought I was an educated person. I do have a master's degree. I went in Montana, but I'm a school teacher. Shouldn't I know some stuff? I took US history in college. So I'm saying that my formal education was woefully lacking. And I don't think it's changed a lot, honestly, from when I was in school, which was a long time ago. In Montana, we had 20-1-501, Wisconsin was before us. Act 31 in 1989, and Washington and some other states have followed. But in the presence of that, now here we are today. And we have all of these states who are jumping in and saying, you can't teach that, you can't teach this, you can't teach that, and books are being banned, and people are being censored. People are being censored. And so we're talking about citizenship, we're talking about democracy, and I would say that if America wants to take her place as the moral leader of democracy, she must speak the truth of her origin. I think we're ready for that. Do you guys? I think we're ready for that. And I think there is redemption. I think there's redemption in truth-telling. And I think that redemption can be potent to the maturity of our nation. And in saying it and claiming it and embracing it. And it doesn't mean that we're blaming anybody. It means that we're coming together in a truthful way and saying, this is how we came to be, and let's decide what we want our country to be together. But I think that if we can come together with the truth, I don't think it's going to divide us. People always say, well, you know, that's divisive. It's like, no, it's uniting. If you don't know me and my story, you know, we need to know each other and our stories. And I am in this boat with you. I'm not here as an expert, even on everything that I wrangled into this book. I am not here as an expert. I am here as someone on the journey with you learning, but I'm committed to making it, and it's making me a better human being. It is making me a better human being. And I've changed some of the things that I do. And so we're talking about voting, we're talking about citizenship. And so I want to start with a piece from Oren Lyons. But before I do that, I want to share just a little bit about the Iroquois Confederacy. Oren Lyons is a faith keeper of the Turtle Clan. He's part of the Grand Chief Council. And his piece is in here. Now, there's a very scholarly piece by Donald Grindy, who's considered the historic expert, he's a native historian, on the Iroquois Confederacy. But Oren Lyons' piece, I'm going to read some of it to you, it's very different because it's what he lives. And you'll see that right away. But the Iroquois Confederacy, founded by the great peacemaker in 1142, is the oldest living democracy on earth. In 1988, the US Senate paid tribute with a resolution that said the confederation of the original 13 colonies into one republic was influenced by the political system developed by the Iroquois Confederacy, as were many of the democratic principles which were incorporated into the Constitution itself. Now, the Iroquois Confederacy first consisted of 5 separate nations: Mohawks, Onondaga, Cayuga, Oneida, and Seneca, and then the last nation was the Tuscarora to become part of the Confederacy. Now, given that it's the oldest democracy in our country, and that there's been House concurrent resolution, Senate bill, that have recognized the contribution, and you can see that Iroquois leaders met with the colonial governors. But how many of you learned about this in US history? How many of you learned about it in American government? One of the leaders talked about the strength and unity, that if you have your arrows, all your arrows together, they're hard to break. One arrow's easy to break. That is actually what he said. He used that metaphor. But if you put them all together, they're hard to break. And that metaphor found its way into our seal. You see that? I think that's so powerful. So I want to read to you a little bit about what Oren Lyons says about it, because he says it so much better, because this is his story. And he's talking about the story of the great law of peace and the peacemaker. We didn't learn that story. We lived it. The great law of peace is what governed our people. You learn by participating and watching. The great law of peace is a daily event. It is how you live. It is how ceremonies are performed, how leaders work, how the country operates. It's how we were brought up. Very free, very independent, and very aware of who we were in terms of our clan and our nation. People kept close track of their clans. The peacemaker began a discussion on governance and how you shall operate and how you shall function. The women were chosen as keepers of the nation. Oh, that's the part we left out, right? That's where they went wrong. No. The identity of children is directly what the woman is. That is the law. This is one of our oldest laws, and that continues to this day. And I have met clan mothers, and their life are devoted. Louise Hearn, a Mohawk clan mother. This is still going on today. It's still living. It didn't stop. It's still going on today, and it's present. So he talks about the meetings in Pennsylvania and the meetings in Lancaster, the Albany Plan, all that history, all these meetings, hundreds and hundreds of meetings that we had. We knew each other well, our leaders. If you go down to Philadelphia, you see the Hall of Independence where the Liberty Bell is. There's a square of green out front. That is Six Nations land. We visited there so often we camped right there. It is our land today even. So the 200th anniversary of the Constitution of the United States was coming up. They were making no consideration or place for Indian people. We said, how can you do that? We went to Washington and we said, where do you want the Iroquois to stand in your celebrations? They said, why? They had no idea. They didn't know. It is not in your books. They don't teach it. It is not in the schools. Nobody teaches the history I'm talking about. We said, we gave you this idea of democracy. We held your hand through the process, our leaders. So it was presented to the Congress. We took it to Senator Inouye, and the result of it was a passage of Senate Resolution 76, recognizing the contribution of the Iroquois to the contribution of the Iroquois to the Constitution of the United States on the principle of democracy. Western democracy is directly from our roots. Democracy didn't come over on a boat. It was here. Democracy was here, and it was all over the country. And there's part of that Senate concurrent resolution there. And here is part of the House concurrent resolution. And so here you have the Senate and the House saying this, but how come I never learned this? I never learned this until, I was a pretty mature adult. And so given that this history remains obscure, right now we're thinking about the essential privilege and right of living in a democracy. Everybody get your ballot in the mail, and everybody's looking at it and thinking of it. We are thinking about that, the privilege, that it's a privilege, but there's a responsibility, isn't there? There's a responsibility in being part of a democratic society. And Indian people, as you know, weren't recognized as citizens. Martha referred to that. At the time World War I was happening. But guess what? Around 17,000 American Indian men participated in all the branches of the military. Came back highly decorated. Those that came back died by a far greater number. And to this day, American Indian people serve in the military at a higher per capita than any other population in our country. And so when those veterans came home, Congress granted citizenship to Native veterans in 1919. Well, who are the next group to be enfranchised? Women, right? The 19th Amendment. But guess what? That didn't include American Indian women. It only included certain women. And so then in 1924, the Snyder Act, people call it the American Indian Citizenship Act, was passed. But what happened after that? States then started doing things because states have their voter requirements. They set voter requirements. So there's a literacy test. You have to read this, the state constitution, or you have to read this. Literacy test. You have to denounce your tribe and say you will no longer be a tribal citizen. You are incompetent because of John Marshall's trilogy cases where he said Indians are like, it's like a ward and guardian. We're the guardian, they are the ward. And so that language was used to say that Indian people were incompetent and they couldn't vote. And so remarkably, Native people persisted in seeking this basic right of citizenship. As early as 1928, in Arizona, Gila River tribal members Peter Porter and Rudolph Johnson unsuccessfully attempted to register to vote in Arizona, and they were turned away. But 20 years later, Yavapai members Frank Harrison, who was a decorated World War II veteran, and Harry Austin went to register to vote. In Maricopa County, they were turned away. They filed a lawsuit, and it overturned the 1928 decision to deny Indians a right to vote. And then similar cases happened. Utah was 1957 when they did away with theirs. North Dakota in 1958. And then you have, it's a lot, let me tell you. Oh, I have to show my niece. I forgot to put her up, Lisette. Because she served in the National Guard, and she actually went to Kuwait and she served 6 months over there. So the Voting Rights Act of 1965, right, was paramount. But it didn't resolve all the challenges facing Indian voters. Reservations that are checkerboarded, non-Indian land, Indian land, due to allotment and homesteading, experience a political quagmire when tribal government and individual tribal members, when they have to engage with elected officials, school board, county commissioners. I know our tribal leaders are going through that right now with PL 280, if you're reading local reservation news. Sheriffs, judges, getting an Indian elected into any of these positions has been daunting. And so if you're a checkerboarded reservation like we are, it's pretty tough to get in there. We had, when I was working at a school, an unnamed school, there were 2 tribal members who filed for the school board and lost because we're the minority. We're the minority population. And so they sued, and the ACLU stepped in and helped them, and they had to create a minority-majority district. And so since that time, we've had 2 Indians on the school board. Guess what they did then? They increased the school board size, so now there's 5. Instead of 3 to 2, there's 5 to 2. But it's tough, and so we're dealing with jurisdiction, and Lake County, wanted some money from the governor to build a bigger jail because I'm just arresting too many Indians. And I could get into all of that demographic, but I won't, of overrepresentation of Native people in prison. Particularly Native women are higher. This is my sister's area, her study on the social construction of Native American criminality. She'll get a kick out of that when she watches this. But it's still tough. Honestly, let's talk about it realistically. The Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, all of these things have happened. The fact that they have acted, and what is this? It's the 70th anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education. And so these things happen in our country, which shows us that change can happen. And it's not through one individual politician, it's through the action of ordinary people who come together for something good and make change. That's how everything. How do you think women got the vote? Ordinary women came together. How do you think the Civil Rights Act was passed? All of these things that have happened have come through the courage and the bravery of ordinary people. And so every generation, it seems, has their challenge, right, in our country. And it seems like we go forward, and then we go back, and we go forward, and then we go back. I talk with my family about, when do you think we thought our grandkids were going to learn Native history? And now we're thinking, well, maybe it's going to be the great-grandkids that are going to really know this. Maybe then America will fully embrace all of her history. And I think we will become more humane. I think we will become a more just society by being truthful. And I'm not saying we're going to go, and they, you know, it's let's tell the truth, and let's be adults and talk about the identity of our country. What do we want America to be? I don't want to let someone in Washington, D.C. decide that. I want to be part of that. I hope you guys want to be part of that. I think people like us need to be at the table. And so then what do we do? Then that's a question, what then shall we do? And so this is the challenge of our time. What we are living through now is a lot of misinformation, a lot of disinformation, a very divided country where I have lost friends over conspiracy theories, not necessarily politics, just wild conspiracy theories, because podcasts have popped up everywhere saying everything. And so there's all of this kind of mean rhetoric going around. And I think Native people have something really remarkable to offer to this conversation. I think we have had some of the most humane societies and the most just societies. And the fact that we are still here today, that we're still ready to sit down at the table and have the conversation. You know, from a place of goodness and love and gentleness. We can speak the truth gently. We don't have to club someone with it. It's not a club. We can be gentle and we can be kind. And we can use humor like Mike Jetty, the joke extraordinaire. I always try to write his jokes down, then when I tell him I forget the punchline. I'm terrible. It's like, this is a Mike Jetty joke. Oh wait, I forgot. But so I would, you know, I guess I would like to close and maybe talk with you a little bit, have a conversation. I was going to read a couple of things to you as a closure. I wanted to read something that Donald Grindy said at the end of his chapter. He has several in here. This one is U.S. Indian Policy and Civil Rights. Without a doubt, American Indians suffer injustices that are a product of historically discriminatory policies toward them as individuals and as members of tribal political entities. The sensitivity or insensitivity in different historical periods to the rights of American Indians marks the ebb and flow of America's faith in its democratic principles. Indeed, Felix Cohen once characterized the rights of American Indians in our society as the miner's canary, holding that if American Indian legal rights suffered, then the fundamental freedoms in American democracy are endangered for everyone. Every generation of American Indians wonders if the dominant society will continue to acknowledge the special rights of American Indians granted by previous generations. And I wouldn't say granted, I would say inherent, our inherent rights. In the final analysis, the solution to this dilemma will demand significant progress in comprehending and adapting the legal system of the larger American society so that Native American demands for the recognition and nurturing of their treaty rights and civil rights can be accommodated. And if we look at, you know, people say you can judge a society by how that society treats the most vulnerable. And so if we think of what's happening with an enormous homeless population, an enormous population dealing with mental health problems, and there's nowhere to go, there's no services for people dealing with mental health. Children Children are the largest growing population of the involuntary poor. You know, how are we caring for our children? Are we cutting school lunches? Are we cutting child care credits? Are we cutting WIC benefits? You know, how are we supporting the children in our country? They're the most vulnerable and the least powerful. So I guess the last thing I'd say, you know, is that, you know, everyone here, we're born for this moment we're in, right? This is our moment, people. This is our moment. This is our moment. What are we going to do with it? You know, I want to do something good with it. I wake up in the morning and I say, I want this day to count for something good. Something good to come of this day. And so this is your moment, folks. And so I want to close with a talk that Henry Rowe Cloud gave in 1949 to high school students. He was one of my heroes. He was the first Indian to graduate from Yale. He co-wrote the Merriam Report. I used that report. It was like my Bible. I had it all flagged. And there, I didn't even know that he was a co-writer. His granddaughter wrote the chapter on him, his granddaughter. And, you know, he looked like a movie star. You'll see his picture in here. And so this is what he said. I just really liked it, and I thought it's a nice way to end. And the Indian race needs pride in your origin. He's talking to Alaska Native kids graduating from high school. Never be ashamed that you are an Indian or Native of Alaska. Never be ashamed. I am thinking of the Iroquois, Haudenosaunee tribe in the States. They had self-government. They had a constitution, followed upon that of the clan organization. Benjamin Franklin took lessons from their tribal organization and put these lessons in the U.S. Constitution of the United States of America. Your race has accomplished things of that sort of world import. You should lift your head and be proud that you are a Native American. And then you should have courage. The Indian race despises a coward. There is philosophy among my Ho-Chunk people: when the smoke of battle clears away, let the enemy see the scars on your face, not on your back. Face forward in the fight against all odds and cost. That is applicable to your vocation and anything you purpose in this life. So that is our charge from Henry Rowe Cloud from 1949. So face forward, be brave, be courageous, make the day count for something good, tell a story, smile, be kind. There's so much that we can do every day. There's so much that we can do every day. And so I'm just so grateful for all these people, you know, who trusted me with intimate stories, you know. They trusted me, they bore witness, they gave me their stories. The grant ended, nothing was done. Where's Julie Saylor at? I had Julie wrangle some things. I said, can you find some relative primary? I had so many people wrangle this project, honestly. And my sister said, oh, just let it go. And I said, I can't. I said, these stories wake me up in the middle of the night. Honestly, I didn't sleep very good for about 5 years. I said that they wake me up. The Tolowa, the story of the Tolowa in California, who were moved from their traditional homelands, and they kept sneaking back to go fish and provide for their people, and then they'd get arrested. And finally, the leader said, we're going home. We are all going home. And they did, and they said, if they want to fight us, then we're going to fight them, but we're going home. It's such a powerful story, and I think those kind of stories are important for kids today to hear and to have courage. That there's so much going on with kids when I go into a school, so many things, you know, that they're facing and that families are facing, that we're facing in our country. But we need to have courage, and we need to encourage each other's hearts. We need to encourage each other's hearts. And so I'm just really thankful that I get to talk about this book. The publishers were like, I said, I just can't run around doing book talks because I just finished 20 films on the Tribal Civics Project. And I said, I don't really have a lot of time to run around. But when they said, I said, oh, I'll go to Helena because I've got friends over there. I don't want to go to Salt Lake City or Phoenix, but coming over here, you know, I'm just appreciative. So thank you guys. I'm happy to visit with you about anything that you'd like to. If you want to ask a question or make a remark, there's a microphone, because we need to remember that people are listening online, and so they won't hear you if you're not talking into the microphone. So you're welcome to engage or to say something. You might have a profound thought or a story or some knowledge or something you want to share.
And just raise your hand and I'll bring it over to you. So.
So you talk about not learning so much of Native American history in school and stuff. Well, I majored in U.S. history in college, and my focus was on the westward movement, which of course involved Native Americans. And I realized after graduation and continuing my studies, because I love history, that there was so much that was not taught even in college. And I think I got most of my education through books, through listening to people like Julie, you know, and I'm very grateful that you have done this book and to further my education. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm curious about the Indian citizen or
In 1919.
the videos that you said you've been working on. What is that project?
It's called Tribal Civics because no one could come up with a better title. So our tribal leaders, Jennifer Finley in particular, were interested in, you know, a civics course, but a tribal civics course for young people. And she mentioned it to me, and I've done a lot of that teaching. I haven't called it civics, but I've taught our treaty and the Constitution and things like that. But she, another friend of mine had a grant. She said, I want to do something for young people. What would you do? And I said, oh, this is what I would do. I would create this program, and I would do a leadership project with it. And so the leadership project with middle school and high school didn't happen. Maybe it will. But the Tribal Civics Project got funded. So I have been interviewing tribal members, and it's a political history, and it's amazing. It is, I was stunned by how visionary and brilliant our tribal leaders were. I mean, I was listening when they renegotiated the license for Kerr Dam in 1982. I mean, how smart that was. I've got Brian Lipscomb, who's the CEO of Energy Keepers, sat down. I asked him one question. He talked for 2.5 hours. So his interview is now 5 films, but it was so powerful. So powerful, you know, that all of these things are happening. So I want young people in my community to say, whoa, you know, look at what we have done. Look at what we have done. There's our conservation history, reintroducing trumpeter swans, the peregrine falcon. I see swans all the time on the river. I heard this great story on NPR where there was a swan pair and the mother got killed in a power line, and there were I think 4 eggs, and they didn't know what to do. But we had started our program, so they brought them up to a surrogate mother who took care of them, and then after they got they brought them back to the dad, and then the dad took care of them. It's so powerful. When I see a swan, it's kind of magic. I didn't see them growing up, and now anytime I go along the river, there's swans. So all of the great conservation things we've done, the thing that we're doing with the water compact, restoration work, fixing up that leaky irrigation project so more water stays in the creeks and the streams, trying to protect bull trout, creating a tribal wilderness, protecting the grizzly bear before the Endangered Species Act. These are all things that kids need to know and feel proud of. that we did this, that we have bought back more land than any tribe who was allotted and homesteaded. We were down to under 40% of our reservation land base. We're up now at almost 70%. Wow. Whoa! We're getting there, you know? Go green. Tribal land on our map is green, so it kind of goes with environmental stuff. So this project is intended to make kids have build their identity in a very positive way, because so much of the time young people hear the negative things. We're the statistic. Overrepresentation in prison, overrepresentation in addiction and poverty, and all of those things. People see a small part and they don't see all the rest of us, which is so much. And so as I interviewed these people, Dan Decker explains the treaty, you know, every article, kids analyze it, we go through the Constitution. Why did we do the IRA Constitution? You can listen to James Steele talk about his not so great negotiations with Governor Schweitzer, and standing up and saying, hey, you know, we get to decide. This is our decision. This is our decision, and this is a sovereignty issue. We have the right to self-determination. We have that right. So people are talking about this. We're talking about how did we get to the largest water compact settlement in the history of the United States, $1.9 billion. And people back home are saying, don't say that, Julie. I'm saying it, $1.9 billion, okay? That's a lot of money, but that money is going to fix the irrigation project, which you can't even believe how bad that is. Old water just running out everywhere. People diverting water. I mean, it's pretty bad. And then restoring floodplains. You know, doing amazing things with the land. I visited with the two young technicians, Tabitha Espinoza and Veronica White. You know, here Veronica White is this young girl, you know, who raised kids. She looks like she's in high school, has a drone license, knows how to use GIS software that I tried to learn. I mean, she's these amazing people on the ground doing really incredible work. And so this project will go live online as soon as the tribe's new website is updated. That's been going on for a while. I think they need a new contractor, but it will go live online. And so there are 20 films. Anyone will be able to stream them. There are study guides for each film. There are more in-depth units if you want to do it, but teachers will show a film. They're all, you know, there's a couple that are over 30 minutes, but I tried to keep most of them under. You know, the Water Compact and Dan Decker, who went into case laws, he explored 9 legal cases, where we flexed our sovereign muscles and went to court, went into litigation. And it's so powerful. And kids need to know. It's not like all these bad things are happening. We're just sitting around and saying, darn it, you know? It's like we're doing stuff. People are thinking, they're talking. And it's brilliant, and it's actually very visionary. And I learned a lot, and I gained this enormous appreciation. And so Dan, when he starts talking about this story of our tribe, you know, he says it's a story of sovereignty. And then I stand next to him and I say, it's a love story. Because it's a story of the fierce love my people have had for each other and for our homeland. That fierce love is why we exist today. That's why we're still here as Scaly, Kelespe, and Kasanka people in this beautiful little reserved homeland that we're trying really hard to take care of, because we have responsibilities to other life too. And so my hope is that kids will be proud of who they are and feel good about it, and that in the process teachers are going to learn something just from sitting and listening to the films. So that's kind of my legacy project for my community, you know, because I'm getting ready. I'm getting ready for a swan song at some point. So cskt.org, whenever everything's updated, all those films will be up for anyone to use or watch or to just listen. These people are amazing. I mean, their commitment and love and dedication is pretty amazing, what they've done. So I encourage you to, down the road, if you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna watch Dan Decker talk about the Hellgate Treaty, no, or Rob McDonald, who's that guy that talked for 2.5 hours? No, Brian Lipscomb. But I learned that his grandmother was the first woman to be elected to the tribal council. You know, I mean, and then I found out that his mother and all of his aunts went to college. His mom got on the train at Dixon and went to Philadelphia to nursing school. So he comes from this amazing line of bold and brave people. And I use his story to tell kids about being ready, taking care of yourself, doing what you need to do, because destiny's gonna come along. For all of us, destiny and fate comes along, right? And if we're ready, then we can step into it. And Brian was there negotiating for mitigation for Kerr Dam. And if he hadn't have been there, I don't know what would have happened. He tells that story. It's powerful and it's amazing. We're one of the only people who, in that licensing, we got an arbitrator to sit down with the power company and us, you know, for damages done to our land. We had an arbitrator, and the arbitrator was a person that does traumatic brain injury with football players, like high-end, you know, big money people. That's major money. But it's just interesting. I learned a lot, and I gained a deeper admiration for my own community that I thought I knew, and I learned a lot. And now I'm interviewing past tribal council and current tribal council and kind of doing that history in a book for kids at home. So I'm just through the Indian agents, you know, the intrusion. I said the intrusion to our community didn't end with the signing of the Hellgate Treaty. Then it started in big time. Because then you had Indian agents, territorial governors, superintendents, commissioner of Indian Affairs, everybody telling us what to do, for heaven's sake. You know, so I'm working up to, you know, 1934 with the Indian Reorganization Act. So, but I'm learning, and I mean, how lucky am I? You know, sometimes in your life, things come around, and I just, you know, I feel like I'm in that kind of spot where I'm doing what I was supposed to do. So I feel really blessed. I feel really blessed.
Are there any other questions? Yeah.
I just want to thank you for bringing the Alaskans in. Our daughter-in-law is Yupik, and for a smallish book, I'm surprised that you were willing to go there.
Oh yeah. I even crossed into Canada with Norma Shorty, who's Tlingit. But you know, these borders came and divided us. These political borders that weren't there, you know. And so no, I searched out people in Alaska. I had met and knew Oscar and learned from him and his work with teachers, doing fish camps, you know, and getting teachers culturally acclimated, you know. And so I knew some people, but I reached out and searched for people, both in Alaska and Hawaii. So I'm glad that you appreciate that. And that, you know, when I had to do a book proposal, because I didn't want to work with an academic press, because they can do whatever they want with your work, and we were determined that I wanted emerging scholars published with senior scholars. And so when I did the book proposal to Fulcrum, one of the things that caught their eye is that Alaska and Hawaii were included. Because normally these anthologies, we're kind of exclusive, Mike, those of us down here, you know? And so that was one thing that caught their eye. In a way, I was able to differentiate it from other anthologies. And that it's written by all Native people, mostly about their own community and their own history and what they have gone through. So it's kind of a personal and intimate telling the narrative. So that's great. I'm glad you were here. I'm glad you were here.
Yeah, thanks very much. I really think you should go to Salt Lake City and Phoenix. You got a really nice message, and people need to hear it. One thing that is one of my pet topics, really, is nuclear weapons. And if you look at a map of Montana, right along the edge of the
Yeah.
Blackfeet Reservation, there's just a string of
Yeah.
nuclear missile installations. And a couple of months ago, I wrote a long letter to all of the tribes in Montana, trying to, I mean, it's not like I expect the Indian people to end the nuclear conundrum that we're in, but I think that they have good reason to complain about the situation because, all of the efforts that your people are putting into
Restoration
and
environmental.
preservation and making things better could be gone like that, you know? And, in my view, we just have to get these things off of our planet. And that starts with getting them out of our state.
Yeah.
Montana is one of the heaviest nuclear armed, armed with nuclear weapons in the world.
Yeah.
And there's a reservation in South Dakota where they actually, the U.S. government put a nuclear missile installation on the reservation against the will of the people there. So this should be a big concern for every American citizen. We have the United Nations has passed the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. So there's a tool there that we could, work toward. But if we're going to value the land here and take care of it, we can't allow a situation to go on. It's going to end in a disaster at some point, unless we can get it done. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that to your attention because I didn't hear back from any of the tribes and I wrote to every tribe in Montana.
You have to kind of know who to write to.
Yeah.
And what happens to those letters, with the tribal council, because they get such mass volume. But I was going to write it down. I couldn't find a pen because it's something that I will think about because certainly, I'm Chines Yaya. I'm a grandma, and my grandson, what is on his mind, obviously, is war and climate change. We talk about that a lot, about what's going on in the world. And I was telling him, thank you, Lam Lamps, that we needed to do better. He's 21, and we had a long talk just about, I was listening to an interview with a woman in Gaza that was being translated, and they were getting grass and going out and plants, whatever they could, and they were boiling them, to eat. And it made me think about a story that Ushni told me, where all of their relatives were at hunting camp, and she was left with a blind elder, and they didn't have any food. They had some flour, and they had some rawhide, and so they put it in a pot of water, and they boiled rawhide and flour, and that's what they ate, And so how do we collectively, I think part of it is having discourse and coming together. And, have we forgotten about collective action? Well, the students are trying. They're talking about, and it's tricky because it's not, how can we support the people in Gaza who are going through this horrific violence, without appearing anti-Semitic, how do you do that, when yes, there was a horror, but this is again on history and what do we really know? Do we think about was it 750,000 Palestinian people that were displaced and, when Israel was becoming a state, that all of these people were moved and how they live? I met 3 young Palestinians who came to our reservation through an exchange program at MSU. And we were doing our native theater. And so a friend of mine Jennifer Finley, had written a play on the treaty. And so these students wanted to meet some Indians. And so I guess I was the only Indian their professor or their chaperone knew. Hey, so I said, bring them on over. So they came over. And they went to the treaty play. We took them around the reservation, shared some language and some songs and, some of our land. But when the treaty play was done, these 2 young women stood up and cried. And they said, that is our story. You are telling our story. And the young man that was with him, when we were walking around out at Kerr Dam, you know, he was following me, just sticking really close to me, and he kept saying, I don't want you to forget me. See, I haven't. He said, I don't want you to forget me. Because he said, I need people to remember me. He said, I can't believe how you can move so freely, because at home there's no movement. You know, so everything that goes in and out is controlled, and movement is controlled. What comes in, what medical care, all of this stuff is controlled. And so they related to Indian people, and we related to them. We related to them. And he kept saying that. He said, I've lost so many of my friends. So many of my friends have been killed. I never know what's going to happen. I never know what's going to happen. And I have not forgotten that young man. And I was thinking about him, you know, particularly right now, and what happened to him. And I was in Salzburg, Austria, for a conference bringing people from countries together. And there were 2 Palestinian men there who were talking, and they wanted to do a presentation on a solution. What could be a solution, you know? And the man started out and he said, I can't wash my car. And I didn't understand what he meant. And he said, and I finally got it, with so much violence, how can I perform an everyday task? It seems ridiculous. You know, to sweep my floor, to do the dishes, to wash my car, when all of these things are going on. And so how do we come together for good? You know, to give voice to people that are being silenced and marginalized, and how do we do this in a way that everybody gets heard? You know, and how do we give hope to our kids? You know, we talk about this, my grandson, you know, he was drinking a Mountain Dew. I said, I really don't want you drinking Mountain Dews, those are so, and I was giving him the talk. And he said, well, yeah, he said, we're already full of microplastics. and then I didn't realize how prophetic that was. He said this about a year ago, and now everything is coming out, how microplastics are in everything. And so, folks, let's think about the young people in the world that they're growing up in, you know, and how we can give them hope. And how do we do that? How do we give kids hope that things can change and things can be better? You know, by talking about when that happened, when good people came together for good. Howard Zinn called it a fugitive moment of compassion. When people across differences in all walks of life can come together for good. You know, I think we need to do that right now in some way. And so for my grandson, you know, I just keep saying, you know, the elders always tell me, our medicine's still out there, Julie. You know, so I keep thinking that and saying that our medicine's still there. You know, the spirits aren't done with us. You know, so we need to pray. We need to give people hope. We need to be kind. We need to be loving. I mean, kindness anymore today is just so healing and sometimes so surprising when someone treats you with kindness. You know, I was thinking about that as I was driving over here. I passed a car, and then there were flashing lights, and I thought, oh, an emergency vehicle. It looked like something was in the ditch, so I got scared and slowed down. And because I had just passed this car and then slowed down, boy, it was like, I thought this person was going to run me off the road. I was kind of terrified, you know. But that people they're edgy, they're angry, you know, we're dealing with so many things in our own personal life, so that when we're around each other, we're not ourselves, you know. We can't be present in the moment. You know, to just smile at someone or be kind, you know, and loving. And we really need to be peddlers of hope right now and kindness. I honestly think that's what we really need. So you have all shown me a great kindness by being here and listening so respectfully and kindly on a beautiful evening when you could have been strolling around this lovely town. So I would say lem lemps husuketh kukani. Thank you so much for doing that to me.